Confused Matthew and Stand and Stan here, reviewing yet another fairly recent film. This
2009.
came out, yeah. Mm-hmm. This is the one that I wanted to see in the theater, but I didn't, because I know there were some really, really big ones. I know this was a while earlier, but Star Trek I got to see in the theater. Yeah. And all these new kind of retellings of old... This isn't necessarily an old film franchise, but it's obviously a classic. Everybody knows what Sherlock Holmes is.
Yeah.
I noticed that you recently bought the entire Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book series.
Yes.
Have you gotten around to reading it yet?
No.
So you don't know anything about Sherlock Holmes?
At this point, I have every book, and I haven't read a single one, so well, no, I
don't. I know very little. So, this is I don't know if this is going to turn into another thing like Watchmen. I don't know if you know this or not, but when we reviewed Watchmen, there were a lot of people who commented and said, if you think this movie is good, you have to read the comic because it doesn't hold a candle to what you get in the graphic novel.
Right.
And I can appreciate that point of view.
Sure.
Because there are things that I've felt that way about a few other things. Yeah. Off the top of my head, I can't think of it. Yeah. But I
know what you mean.
Yeah, but I think that people who were fans of the original source material want something that is representing what they love well.
Yeah.
And just to give everybody a heads up, I can't really judge this movie that way because I don't know anything about the Sherlock Holmes world. But I do know that I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I was never bored. I was always interested. The characters were very dynamic and interesting and entertaining. This would have shaped up to be a very good summer film to see in the theater, and I'm very sorry I missed it there. But I really enjoyed this movie.
Well, I didn't like it very much.
Really?
And I wasn't as interested as you were, and it had tremendous potential. And to my mind anyway, it wasn't bad. I have to say that. It wasn't a bad movie.
You weren't wowed, though.
No, I thought it was... I really liked some of the banter between Holmes and Watson. I didn't like any of the stuff between Holmes and his girlfriend.
Well, the girlfriend was kind of plugged in there because they needed a girl. I wasn't put off by her, but she was plugged in there because they needed a girl. It's the same reason we had the Rachel Dawes character in Batman Begins, who I despised.
Yeah.
I didn't despise this woman. I just felt like she was just kind of sitting there to be a liaison between him and the rest of the plot. Yeah.
And also, I didn't think the actress played that time period very well. She was the only thing in that movie that seemed out of place for the period to me, anyway.
If she was, I didn't notice, but I wasn't really paying attention to her until she was naked. But aside
that's
from
not
that,
a huge thing. But let me just say. I like the banter between the two. I loved how they went through clips and flashbacks and stuff. Yeah. How he was working this all out in his head. But that was too few and far between for me. And I thought the personal stuff was less interesting than the case. Essentially, I wanted more case and less personal stuff.
I had the exact opposite reaction.
Wow.
I liked the case very much. And I thought it was interesting to sort of show the opposite side of Holmes's world because he's a man of essentially science,
right?
Both physically and in his own mind. And here's this other world that's coming in with all this black magic crap.
They didn't do a thing with it.
But they sort of did at the end.
No, they didn't.
But I was more interested in the personal things. I always thought that it is a very interesting thing when the plot takes a while to get going here, but what we see in the beginning, for the most part, is the way Holmes's mind works.
Now
when you are interested in a character doing what he's doing before the plot even starts, I think you're on a really good road to a pretty good film.
I agree with you, but I think they could have done that better. And if you think about it, think about the scene in the restaurant where he had made a mistake and she threw wine in his face and he felt bad, and you could see the wheels turning in his head. What did that amount to in the end? It gave us an introduction to this character, but...
Well, that's what the scene was for.
Yeah, I know, but the personal stuff versus the case, it was a little bit jumbly. I thought it was... I didn't think it was threaded together very well. It seemed like, okay, we're going to do the case, okay, now stop for a minute, we're going to do personal stuff, rather than have it be more fluent. The other thing was, the biggest criticism I have of this movie... At some point, Holmes needed to start doubting himself. The magic trick needed to be so good that and people needed to sort of be saying, maybe this really is, and he needed to have a moment where he was doubting himself, and then he came back.
I agree with you there. I see where you're going with that, and I agree with you.
And that's why I say the supernatural stuff supernatural versus science, they didn't really do that. It was just nobody who, Watson and the girl and Holmes, they never for a second believed that this was going on, and the people doing the magic, we don't learn. I mean,
but the audience is doubting whether or not it's going on. I didn't, but I think the audience, the audience might be questioning whether or not. Yeah, well, actually, as I myself say that, I wasn't doubting it for a second.
I knew right from the beginning that this was a magic trick. I just didn't know how it was done.
Yeah.
But I thought that could have been done so much better.
Well, I agree with you to a point. I think the movie has elements that are strong enough to where I guess that didn't really bother me very much. I will say that the ending of this film is pretty much just an advertisement for the next film, which I've heard that they're in pre-production right now.
They are.
So
and I can't wait.
If you're looking for a story where Holmes is going to be doubting himself and questioning himself, I think we're going to get that in the next film.
And that's a good point.
This is a pretty good introduction to what can be a good franchise. I think.
Thought it could have been done better, but it wasn't bad. I want to stress that this wasn't a bad movie, and I did enjoy a lot of it.
There was very little that I didn't like about this. I thought there were a few pacing issues towards the end more than anything else. Yeah. When he's studying the black magic and he kind of zips right to the conclusion that was just a little easier to figure out than I thought. Maybe this could have been a little trickier. When he puts everything together in the end, with everything that was happening in the movie, that was pretty good.
Now let me bring up something that you had said about Batman, the 80s Batman with Michael Keaton?
Yes.
You had said once that your problem with that character was that he was never challenged. Do you think that Sherlock Holmes was challenged in this film at all?
No.
You mean but I wished he was.
But I liked watching the way his mind works because it was very interesting to see that this is a guy, and we learned this in the beginning of the film, this is a guy who needs something to do. If he's not doing something, if he's not on a case, he drives himself crazy and he sits in his room. He's an introvert. Yeah. He sits in he's much like me when I don't have anything to do. He sits around in his room and he fidgets around with all these things that don't really go anywhere. Yeah. He needs something productive for his mind to do, or he's going to go insane. Right. That's something I thought they could have done more with.
Absolutely could have too. I agree with you there. And I was going to say, to the degree that those things were good, you're talking about elements. Yeah, the elements worked. I didn't think the overall picture.
I actually think you're more right than wrong when it comes to the elements not necessarily adding up to a spectacular film. I mean, there are definitely things that could have been done differently here. As I think
some of
about
its parts are definitely greater. Than
the
whole,
but I liked those parts.
Me too.
And so I guess this is kind of a mild recommendation because I was not bored once during the entire film. Maybe different parts in the middle, but very negligible. I mean, this is a very entertaining film, and it's very well written.
I agree with both those points. A critic had a serious problem. One critic that I read, he had a big problem with the action in this film. And
Let's leave that for a cliffhanger because we need to stop for part 2.
Okay.
Critic with a problem. Ooh. Stay tuned. Okay, so you were saying about the critic.
One critic in particular that I read, I'm sure there's probably more, but he had a serious problem with the action in the film and the karate fight. I guess Sherlock Holmes doesn't do that in the books.
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know either, but I guess he doesn't. He's not really like a karate fighter or whatever. Although it's not too much of a stretch to think, well, if he's smart enough to, he would know how to
before
hurt
you get
somebody.
Before you get to your critic and his or her criticism, I wanted to say that I actually thought that made the character a little more interesting because he wasn't just fighting for the sake of action. I mean, the action scenes are obviously put in so that the audience won't be bored, but this is the way of saying, this is the way Sherlock Holmes' mind works, and it's not just with science; it's with everything.
Right, and the point, and to that critic who had the problem, because his thing was he thought that they put the action in there to get the kids into the theater, and he's probably right.
Probably,
but contrary to just making this a dumb action picture, here's what I think they did. I think because to me, the action scenes in this movie were sparse. They were very few and far between.
And they were repetitive.
They were repetitive, but usually I think most action is, but they were few and they were relatively short. I think they said, let's put a couple of action scenes in this so we can put them in the trailer.
Well, I was going to say, that's way more due to the people who make the trailers than it is to the people who are making the movie.
And what I think they duped young people to go in and see a movie about character stuff and about good dialogue. But
I don't think it was much of a dupe because
I meant that.
I understand, but this movie really does have a lot of high energy, and I think younger audiences are going to be drawn to this, and I don't think they're going to be disappointed.
But not to the point of making it dumb, and I appreciated that.
Yeah. I don't know who wrote this movie because I haven't gone back and looked at any of the writing credits yet, and they were a little hard for me to see at the end because it's all done in brushstrokes.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that no one asked Nicholas Meyer if he wanted to write this.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, maybe they did and he turned it down. I don't know.
Nicholas Meyer, by the way, he directed.
He wrote Star Trek's 2, 4, and 6. Well, co-wrote 4 and 6. He wrote 2. And he's a huge Sherlock Holmes fan.
He's actually written authorized Sherlock Holmes novels.
His biggest one was the 7% Solution, which I have not read.
Neither have I.
Unfortunately. And I feel bad about that. He's my favorite writer.
Hey, eventually maybe we'll get to it. But if you know what? I'm going to ask people to put things in the comments again. Put in the comments or send me or Matthew a message. If anybody knows if Nick Meyer has said anything about this movie, because I can't find anything. But if anybody knows if he's said anything about this movie, I want to know.
He seems to me like a guy, because he has the same philosophy that I suppose Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had, which was they're not really big on continuity.
Right.
And I'm not either. I mean, when it's continuity, when it comes to character consistency, right. Being true to the character, being true to the stories, that's where I care about it. Yeah. But if Chekhov wasn't there in the Khan episode and he was there in the film and he knows it, I don't give two shits. I just want to see a good story, and he puts that together well. So that's a philosophy that I like. Obviously, these writers had the same philosophy because I guess, I don't know, but I've heard from a few fans that they took a lot of liberties with the character and his personality. Did. But it's nice to see Robert Downey Jr. getting so much work. We were talking about this during the movie because Stan and I have always been fans of Robert Downey Jr. And I remember saying when he was having his troubles, you had actually said, I think the exact quote was, "Damn it, Robert Downey Jr., if our uncle can get off drugs and stay out of jail, then so can you." and he has, and I'm glad because I like him.
Me too, and I always liked him, and I'm glad he has a career again, and I am so glad that this role did not go to fucking Johnny Depp.
I knew you were going to say that.
Everything else is going to, because I am so tired of him.
I think everybody is, and I think he's doing himself a disservice because I like Johnny Depp. I'm just sick of seeing him everywhere.
Me too,
every time I see him in one of Tim Burton's roles, I'm like, let another actor have a chance to do something like that.
And Robert Downey Jr. is perfect for this. Johnny Depp would have just been... You don't even see the character anymore. You just see Johnny Depp.
Did you see the abysmal Sleepy Hollow movie? He would have been that. He just would have done that.
Exactly. Good point.
Yeah, you pretty much know what to expect with him now. Yeah. Robert Downey Jr., man, he's been doing some really differential roles.
Yeah, he has.
Especially in Tropic Thunder, which was fantastic. But
we usually talk about comedies, but we both like.
We both like Tropic Thunder. Yeah. I like this film a lot. As we've been talking about it, I tend to agree with you that there are a lot of things that could have been done to pull this together a little more. But I think that they can do that in the next film.
It's kind of like and by the way, anybody who watched our original co-review of Star Trek when it came out, the 2009 thing, I'm going to have to do an update review to that because my opinion has changed dramatically since we did that. Just want to make that as a disclaimer before I say this. I would say this is kind of like the first Star Trek movie where it's not perfect by anybody's stretch of the imagination, but it's a good first start. It's a good pilot.
When I see things like this, and I would include the Star Trek movie in that, I always compare it to the first Spider-Man movie, which I didn't like very much at all because I felt like it was just setting up the next movie, and the next movie was fantastic. Yeah. So for all I know, the next Star Trek movie could be great. This next movie I'm sure will be great. But I think of those three, let's just put them out there because those are the examples of Spider-Man, Star Trek, and this. Yeah. This is the best launching pad movie of the three that I've seen.
Probably so. And by the way, thank God this wasn't an origin story because I'm getting a little sick of those too. Yeah. I really liked how you just jumped right into...
I'm actually not getting sick of origin stories because they usually don't tell them, and I'm glad that someone is actually coming back and deciding that we can make a movie just about how all this started, and then later on we can really start the franchise. I actually kind of like that strategy.
I was glad that they. I guess what I was really glad about is the fact that they didn't take that sort of crass road where they say, "Oh, everything else is having an origin story, so let's just do that." No, they decided
they did their own thing, and I think it worked fairly well. I really liked this movie.
I liked it.
All right,
I liked it. Minimally.
Marginally well?
Yeah.
I liked it a little bit above marginally, but we both liked it, so there you go. If you have a chance to see it, and if you've already seen it, I hope you liked it. We will talk to you next time.